And don't send
Right.
your laptops on the day of onboarding. Please do it much before. Set up their accounts.
In that case, if you're taking 7 interviews and then the candidate decides to not join your organization, how much time you have?
In today's world, a lot of organizations just put people on the interview process. There's no methodology that is attached in training them. I've
Right.
seen that the person is waiting on a call to receive a welcome, and then people ask,
Nobody join.
nobody is there, and it's not a. And I always tell recruiters, first when
Yeah.
you get into an organization, don't even look for what the skill is. Sit with your managers. Are you able to even gauge the pulse of the candidate? How easy feeling about the offer? I mean, not just about the compensation, but then has he been connected to our vision and values? Has he?
Hello, everyone. In this episode, we are going to talk about remote hiring challenges. We have an industry veteran, as always. Swapna comes with a 15 plus years experience in the people function. She has been leading multiple teams into recruitment as well as HR. And would love to know your thoughts, Swapna, if you can quickly introduce us.
Sure. Thank you, Raj. Hi, as Raj introduced, my name is Swapna Chanamala. I've been in the industry for about 15 plus years, extensively into human resources. With the kind of an interest that got generated, I've also moved into empowering professionals to achieve success, especially in the space of HR. And today's, the podcast, I'm really excited to talk about the recruitment challenges.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Thanks a lot, Swapna. Let's probably set the context. What we want to do in this podcast is help organizations basically decide if they want to go with remote hiring, right? And also discuss a few challenges around it. If some organization is already doing this, we would want to have some key takeaways from this podcast that they can implement tomorrow, right? So, if I had to start with one of the question is. How do organizations move to a remote hiring, right? If they are used to doing an on-site interview, on-site candidates coming in their office and so on, how to move from this to say a remote hiring setup?
Well, see, that's an interesting question, Daz, that has been coming on my way as well. How do we move from in-person to remote? But then, again, it all depends upon the kind of an approach you have in hiring. I mean, if you were to ask me about the entire remote hiring, the very first thing that I see as a challenge, especially when we talk about in person, it's all about your body language, it's all about your presence, it's all about how you're also approaching the organization and the problem statement. But then, due to pandemic, COVID-19, we all know that, we had to go remote. There was no
Yeah.
other way because this industry required to function somehow. And I
Yeah.
think the most of the organization have already moved, but then to emphasize more on that, there are certain definitely some challenges in terms of hiring, which I've also experienced when I moved into remote hiring, virtual interviews, and things like that. Now, very importantly, why should we move from in person to remote? Let us look at that way. The very first thing that I would talk about is about candidates' experience, candidates
Right.
cost savings. It is so much energy that goes from all the recruiters getting that person somewhere from a place, and then flying him for an interview at the organization because we wanted to see him in person, though we were digitalized, but then we've never used our digital products to do it. But now
Right.
what is happening, the organizations are benefiting out of all of these in terms of cost saving. Now,
Yeah.
what is the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge is basically getting that person for an interview, which is virtual.
Right.
Now,
Right.
why I would say the biggest challenge, uh, the person must be entering in so many organizations in so many places, and we do
Yeah.
not know how he's been conducting, what kind of offers that he's picking up. So that is where I think we should also embrace the digital products in HR to bring certain discipline, to the entire interview processes.
Right.
Very importantly, very, very importantly, let us look at from a perspective of a candidate. What
Right.
is There's a lot of time that has been saved for him personally or for her personally. Now,
Yeah.
the same point, let us look at from an organization point. What is the cost that we are saving on a candidate? Your time, your energy, your manager's energy, your interviewer's energy, your interviewer's time, your interviewer's productivity. Of course, the recruiter who's working on this position, imagine the candidate backs out at the last minute when the whole interview process is done. You are at a biggest loss in the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And when you look at from a virtual interview perspective, you will still have a tunnel. You will still have a funnel which will help you backing up your last minute, offer dropouts, right?
Right. Right.
So now a lot of people say that, from a candidate perspective, the interview process is too long.
Hmm.
You don't enjoy it anymore.
Right.
Like just because it's a remote interviews, it's just because it is virtual interviews, people expect us to be available, and then we've got an hour or 2 hours of time, we just lose it for no good reasons, and that results into bad experience. So that is where
Right.
I think it's important to bring some sort of discipline from us also. As I said, we need to embrace HR digital products. Now,
Right.
some of the important pointers when I talk about the candidates experience, the onboarding part of it. Now
Hmm.
imagine ki we are doing a virtual onboarding. The very key important aspect, communication.
Yeah.
Who they're going to meet, where are they going to meet, how is their onboarding day going to look like, what is the collaboration. So I think there are certain things, the companies are not willing or probably not putting that efforts moving from in person to remote. I mean, we're all
Right.
looking at the challenges, but we're not looking at the benefits. So it's an opportunity for an organization also to do a lot of cost saving and a lot of resource saving as well.
As part of COVID, right? Like a lot of organizations were forced to get into this when they were not even giving, say, work from home for a week to candidates who are
Exactly.
traveling to. So now you're
Exactly.
forced to get into this mode. And a lot of times, what happens is after, say, COVID was lifting up restrictions, now organizations started sort of battling with challenges that come with remote hiring, right? So, for example, screen time should have been reduced and so on. So, it's
Exactly.
so many sort of aspects changed of hiring, right, which were earlier not seen as that, right? So let's probably dive deeper into these challenges, right? So if you had to map with, say, interviewing challenges, right, as a say recruiter scheduling interviews or interviewers taking interviews, what challenges do you see in the remote hiring side of things when some of the benefits were being taken in the on-site
Right.
scenario?
So again, both sides, right? From a candidate and an organization perspective, I will talk from an organization perspective, which I've been experiencing more often,
Right.
which is the biggest challenge is the communication part. Now, what
Hmm.
happens? Now, today I'm interviewing somebody remotely. Now, in spite of your calls, it is so important that person looks at an email with the steps they go through the interview process, who they're going to meet up, what kind of an expectations that they have in that particular role, and what it means for them to work with this organization or to interview. I mean, no matter the person gets in or doesn't get in, ultimately it's important for an organization to leave an impression that he could refer more people. I don't see
Right.
that engagement happening often. It is like headhunting. We are running and running behind the candidates is just to close the position. I don't see that engagement often happening. The other very important thing that I've also noticed is the schedules and the availability.
Hmm.
Every time something comes up, we have to reschedule. And it
Yeah.
is it is extremely annoying sometimes to the candidate as well. Like,
Yeah.
he's giving that 1 or 2 hours of from his schedule, and we are always rescheduling some interviews, or we are trying to just see we can patch somebody else for that interview. So in
Right.
the remote hiring, yes, that has been like major setbacks.
On that, do you think on the on-site interviewing side of things there were lesser reschedules as compared to
Well,
the?
yes, because people were traveling to the office. And then
Yeah,
you
yeah,
mid of the way, you can just can't call and say that, I got into some extended meeting. You just need to go back, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think there was some sort of a discipline that was maintained.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, in the remote hiring, that discipline has somewhere faded. I think, it's important for organizations to focus on that bit.
Right, right, right. Got it. And as you mentioned, scheduling is one of the issues,
Mm.
which which is sort of the problem used to be there before also, but then now the recruiters are much more busy with doing this because this is happening a lot more than usual, right?
Yes, yes,
Uh,
a lot more. I myself have rescheduled thrice or 4 times with the candidate. It is extremely like saddening for us, repeatedly saying apologies for no good reasons.
right, right, right.
And you know
And
what?
do
That also comes with lengthy interview processes. Like,
right.
I would not be able to quote the organization that I work with, but then, they've got 6 to 7 rounds of interviews.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God. And can you believe out of that, your HR and I mean, your recruiter round happens initially for screening. At the last, there is an HR cultural fitment rounds. And imagine
Right,
somebody clears all the rounds and, culturally they don't fit, they get rejected.
right.
Okay. And that is in the world of remote hiring.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
it's also like in that case, if you're taking 7 interviews and then the candidate decides to not join your organization, how much time you have wasted across all of these rounds,
exactly,
basically.
your time, energy, interviewers, productivity, everything is killed in this whole process. And
Right,
I mean, always ask for this logical explanation. Okay, why do you want to conduct 6 rounds?
right,
What is
right,
it? What is it like? It is expected to have in every round. Okay, and then when you resolve that, why can't we combine that and just do one round of an interview and try to bring some sense to that rounds of interviews. And you know what,
right.
in midway, the fourth round or fifth round candidates is enough is enough, because things
Makes
have
sense.
changed. It is no more the organization's market, it's all candidates market right now.
Yeah, yeah, definitely,
And
definitely.
I've also seen organization which does an introduction call, and it like hours fly by in that introduction calls.
Right, right. And so yeah, this was more towards the interviewer side of things, right? Do you think the hiring manager interactions have also been impacted or probably enhanced after going into remote world?
Well, I wouldn't say it is enhanced, but it's just becoming more depleting that way. Sorry to comment, but then they're also stressed with all these things. Continuously being on the calls. The kind of a physical interaction over a cup of coffee, meeting the person, taking through the office, and showing them kind of an atmosphere that has
Right.
all faded away. And the interviewers themselves are slightly stressed out, and most of the time, like very often, I see that they're just point to the question, like interview questions, and then just leave it. So I
Hmm.
always emphasize, be it remote or be it physical, right? It is important that you build some sort of a relationship, and it has gradually faded in remote interviews.
Right, right. And
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's a very interesting idea that hiring managers are usually trying to judge the candidate, right? This is more of like how the candidate is going to be when you hire that person.
correct.
And doing that remotely is very hard, right? You can
Mhm.
design some questions which bring out qualities of the candidate, but then
Mhm.
if you are in an in-person setting, you are so much more likely to judge him or her correctly than a
Mhm.
remote environment, right?
So
Same
I,
thing.
I mean, see, this was in one workshop that I'd come, like very interesting. One of the mentor, very senior person said, which I also truly believe. Like when I met a couple of very senior HRs for my interviews way back, right? They never had an interview as an interview. It was more like an interactive discussion.
Right, right.
Like in your remote hiring, right? The managers, instead of having that interview to interview, have an interview as a conversation. That's
Yeah.
going to be like more connecting to what you're trying to build as well.
Right, right, right. Yeah, and a lot of times those walks or coffee or something like that is just like a conversation, right? You don't have to be in an interview setup per se.
Exactly. And you know what? You can just, get a glimpse of the whole candidate's profile in that 15 minutes. So,
Yeah,
I mean, see, remotely having a cup of coffee and all of that is impossible. But then, get your managers trained. you
Right.
know, to do an interview in a very interactive way. So I also see that, in today's world, a lot of organizations just put people on the interview process. There's no methodology that is attached in training them.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of organizations do this now. What they are
Mm.
doing is probably just add one person for one shadow interview and just put them in the interview panel from the next interview, which doesn't work, right? Even if you're good with the skill that you're hiring for,
Mm.
uh, interviewing is a different skill altogether, right? What questions to ask, how to respond to
Mm.
candidates, and so on. Makes sense. And what do you think about the interaction of recruiter with the hiring manager? How has that impacted with a remote setup?
So
Hmm.
I only feel that recruiters at a job that they were just looking for skills. Now,
Hmm.
there is a humongous, work that needs to be done on the recruiter front as well. Like, I've been in some meetings when you ask recruiters what company does, they don't have an answer for it. All that they know is the role requires Java, Python, whatever, and then that is done. How
Right.
many years of experience? But then I've also worked with brilliant recruiters
Right. Yeah.
who had persistently behind the hiring managers to give them in depth of that role, and they had the most powerful in terms of influencing a candidate.
Right. And it also helps the candidate, right? Because
Mm,
the recruiter is the one who is going to do the all the conversation with the candidate. So if the
mm,
recruiter doesn't know this, then it's just there in the hiring manager round that you are getting a lot of rejections. But
mm.
then the calibration had to happen a lot sooner than
Exactly,
hiring
exactly.
manager round, right?
Yeah.
Sounds good. And as a candidate, what do you think are some of the challenges in interviewing with companies who are hiring remotely, for example?
See, one thing I've said, communication. Second thing, the length of the interview process.
Yeah.
The kind of a people that they interact. See, as we look at from an organization perspective, in the very for 15 minutes, I would have a fair idea where the candidate stands. It's the same thing opposite that candidate is also judging us on. Now,
Right.
I've even had feedbacks from the candidate. The interviewer was in mid of something and he asked me just one question and pointed it out. Like,
Right.
not that they wanted to say something about it, but then, healthy, they said that, interviews was not capable enough to give. And, some feedbacks like, candidates, when they were trying to solve tests or, some problem statement, they
Hmm.
came back and said, what kind of problem that was given to us? It is just on the table maths that they take.
Hmm. Got
Right,
it.
and from a candidate perspective, because now things have evolved. uh, Everybody are doing some sort of courses, everybody expects the complex statements to come on their way to solve,
Right.
right? And as an organization, what expectations that we have, it is multiple times a candidate also has, be it
Right.
compensation, be it role, be it growth. And today youngsters, especially Gen Z, they ask me tomorrow what I will be after being a developer in the organization.
That's great. Now the recruiters need to be much more than just recruiting people.
Right. You know what? I always tell recruiters, first, when
Yeah.
you get into an organization, don't even look for what the skill is. Sit with your managers. Pester
Right.
them to give you as much as information so that you can go with full force. And Raj, you won't really believe today if I were to hire a recruiter, right? I will end up hiring zero people in the world. Exactly, I'm saying this, because the recruiter, the kind of a talent that they should come in terms of job search strategies, or bringing up new trends and ideating in their own ways.
Yeah.
Like there's been any hard interest on that.
Right. Yeah. And this is something that, as a software engineer, I was not very aware of these things. But as I talked to very good recruiters, right, they would talk about, say, talent mapping. They would find competitors who are using the same stack.
Mm,
They would like find niche kind of websites on which the candidates hang out, like GitHub or say Stack
mm,
Overflow, which most of the other recruiters are not even talking about because they don't even know that, okay, this is where I need to find people, right? Else they would pick the keywords, post a job on, say, some job board, and then wait for applicants to come and
mm,
pass on these candidates, right? So that's a very interesting point. Actually, uh, like some sort of evaluation in your recruiter hiring needs to incorporate these, like strategizing the
Hmm.
candidate funnel, right? How do you bring in more good top of the funnel candidates, basically, right? So yeah, coming back to remote hiring, right? Do you think there are more delays in remote hiring as compared to say on-site hiring or any other?
See, the delay is because people have extended the rounds of interviews. There's no logic.
Hmm.
I mean, probably for them there is a logic behind it. I would not get into it. But then, yes, comparatively, remote, hiring has become like more in terms of time consumption. Like earlier,
Hmm.
when we were doing in person, right? We had those metrics to fill the position within 45 days and things like that. So there was this friction, there was this traction that we had to work in. Ki today, agar they complete 2 rounds on the call, third day they're going to be here.
Hmm.
But today, I think with remote, there is slight delay due
Right,
to
right. And
unavailability of the interviewers or due to unavailability of the candidates. And given they're all working from remote and working from houses, I think the expectations of work deliverables have also increased from the organization perspective.
Got it. Got it. And do organizations measure these effectively? Do you think that they should have these visibility points across like the time spent in say shortlisting or interviewing or offer negotiations? Do you think organizations measure that?
See, I know they do it, but then again, how effectively that has been done and sort of acted and brought in results, it is
Hmm.
not very much sure. Now, at the end of your financial year, HR also produces some sort of their achievements and their delays of not delivering and things like that. So one of the key pointers that they talk about is the position that they hired and within what timelines. So,
Hmm.
how do you articulate and why there were delays and how you were able to influence the leaders in in bridging that gap is
Got it.
important. So,
And like, what are some of the tools that companies use to measure this time? Is it always position filling, or is it more tactical in terms of look, okay, what is the average time of shortlisting a resume? Does that happen
um,
more often?
yeah, that too. That happens every quarter where they go for meetings, right? It is time to fill,
Hmm.
right from the position when it has been listed to the person who has been onboarded. So generally, they try to do it within like 45 days to 60 days of time. So that's how a lot of organizations go by in filling the position. Uh,
Right.
they they also look at the multiple channels where we were able to source those profiles from. Because as HR budgets coming, most of the budget is used on the digital HR digital products. Could be hiring channels or could be any of those channels that could create the candidate pool. Now that
Right.
is also been taken into consideration. Like where are we doing good? How are we doing good? What kind of a number that has been generated? Now, as
Right.
it goes on, aging, we generally name that as an aging. Like in case
Hmm.
what is the aging of a candidate who had come in. Now, in case if you're
Right.
not being able to close that position within the timelines that we have agreed for, then it really reflects right on our reports.
Right, right. And
Mhm.
as a leader, right, how do you get visibility into some pain points out of these 45 days, right? Because 45 days is too broad for you to understand what might be going wrong
Mhm.
inside it, right? It might
Mhm.
be offer declines, it might be actually interviews rescheduling a lot of times. So, as a TA leader, how would you recommend people to get more visibility into the full process, basically?
So I mean, it is sometimes really hard to get that visibility. As I said, there are minor things that keeps happening, scheduling, people falling sick, or probably the positions have changed. Sometimes it happens that today I get a developer position and it suddenly changes to a QA position.
Hmm.
The pain points when we talk about, and today there is certainly 150 positions that comes in, and tomorrow the focus needs to be on campuses. Now,
Got it.
the much more pain point is that availability of people
Hmm.
or the talent pool or rejections.
Right.
The most painful is the rejections. Now, when we
Hmm.
talk about a candidate rejection or a profile rejection, it plays again both the ways. what is expected and what recruiter is meeting and what is the
Right.
code that's available. Now,
Right.
I always encourage recruiters, after certain point in time, the number of resumes in case it gets rejected, that means there is a work that needs to go around. Sit with
Right.
the leaders. Either
Hmm.
what expectations they have, it is not available, or probably your search criteria is wrong. So there are many pain points in that way, and
Right. Right.
address them one by one. I said, there is always a focus that gets changed also sometimes.
Right, right. Yeah, I think the point that you mentioned, right? A lot of things are very subjective, right? It's not putting a number to something which probably is going to be changed by external factors, like as you
Mm,
mentioned, positions themselves are changing, right? If a software position becomes QA position, there's nothing that the recruiter can actually do
mm,
those in those cases, right? Sounds good. And I think towards the end of this, right, once you are almost about to close a candidate, right, what are some of the things that you have to do as a remote hiring setup to make sure that the onboarding is very smooth, making sure that the candidate feels welcomed, making sure that the candidate feels that this is their new home? So how do you ensure these activities are done correctly?
right. So, again, to bring back the point, either it could be remote or either it could be physical. All that matters is a kind of a engagement that you have right from the recruiter. Now, it
Hmm.
is so much that I always emphasize the kind of a relationship that we are building. Like today, you have offered a candidate. Now, then, are you able to even gauge the pulse of the candidate? How easy feeling about the offer? I mean, not just about the compensation, but then has he been connected to our vision and values? Has he been connected to the organization's problem statement that we are trying to solve? Is he happy that is his family happy about him working with the organization? So that kind of a relationship that comes from all sorts of the process.
Right.
Be it your manager who's getting connected, be it your recruiter who's getting connected. When you have offered a candidate, have you had that the where you have cultivated enough for him to come and join? Have you cleared
Right.
the path and the questions that he had on top of the mind? Now
Right.
that definitely comes in with the kind of a onboarding plan that you have. Now
Hmm.
post your all of these things, imagine that if the candidate is good and everything goes positive, he joins. What if he doesn't join? You're wasting your time, right? So
Hmm.
if your engagement isn't well, especially again in the remote hiring, I've always seen that we lose contact.
Yeah.
Aj did I have given you offer? I'm very happy sitting in my place. Chalo, one position is done. But
Right.
then have you handholded that person well? Have you got in touch with that person about the notice period? Is there something that he's struggling that we need to really help with? So that kind of a relationship, if it is not built, and then
Hmm.
you're just thinking by offering a candidate your work is done, I don't think so you could really establish any kind of onboarding experience.
Right. And especially, I think a lot of things that have changed after the COVID time is the communication is now on email or WhatsApp, right?
Mm.
Now you are not gauging the candidate pulse by doing that messaging, right?
Yes.
Any amount of follow-ups or any amount of
Mm.
engagement would not lead to you gauging if the candidate is going to join, or if
Mm.
he has he or her has some questions around the
Mm.
joining of organization. But yeah, interesting. And how do you feel the recruiters or the HR leaders should welcome these candidates into the organizations? Let's say that there's no offer declining scenario happening. After the candidate joins, right? There's still some amount of work that needs to go through to ensure that the person is settling in well. So, what are some of the pointers on those angles?
Well, one thing that I will say is get rid of the manual documentation as much as possible.
Hmm.
It is overwhelming.
Hmm.
Right. I mean, I know for sure when I've onboarded some candidate, there's a humongous documentation that he needs to do. And in
Hmm.
this remote, hiring process, right, try to minimize as much as documentation as possible, especially on the day of onboarding. Now,
Right.
plan your onboarding day well. Now, don't run here and there. Somebody is late, and there's nobody on the call to welcome that person. I've
Right.
seen that the person is waiting on a call to receive a welcome, and then people ask,
Nobody checked.
Nobody is there, and it's not a experience that you could really create. I mean, of
Right.
course, the candidate is joining us, and if you're not present, then it's definitely not a good experience. Now, when
Right.
you're
Right.
certainly getting that person on board, when that person has been onboarded, there has to be a collaboration call.
Right.
There
Right.
are people that he has interviewed with, the team that is working with, the kind of an introduction that goes on, the kind of a
Right.
work that goes on. So most of the time, people just come, join, and they're on the work. They don't
Hmm.
even know the culture. Like, I always emphasize on this. When the HR leader is getting an induction done, talk about the culture, talk about, tomorrow if there's an issue, where are they going to write? Are they going to write at HR at XYZ, or are they going to just call you and say, I have an issue? So you need to make it a
Right.
point, somebody connects with you so strongly that they should be able to talk to you, voice it out. So make it
Right.
simple, clean, minimize your documentation, make sure there's a collaboration well, and hand holding
Right.
of 30 days. Don't leave it just because somebody is sitting other side in a different place. Hand hold,
Right.
simple, and make sure that he's onboarded and is well equipped. And don't send
Right.
your laptops on the day of onboarding. Please do it much before. Set up their accounts. Simple stuff, Raj. We really, I
Yeah.
mean, see, I should also accept that I also flunked in these aspects, okay? We are running
Yeah.
around taking the addresses on the day of their onboarding, and we're telling, please join on your own laptop. And it's not
Laptop for
very
today.
easy. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
these are extreme simple things, very, very simple.
Right.
They will still flunk on that.
Right, right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think one of the things in recruiters' defense is just the amount of tactical work that they have to do. They are sort of bound to do sloppiness there, right? So,
Exactly.
if they probably offload it, or if they have enough bandwidth in the team to sort of offload the responsibilities, right? That if someone takes care of post offer engagement sort of things, or someone takes care of just sourcing side of things, so then at least there's someone who's responsible for it, and also it's much more streamlined in that way, right?
Hmm. So
But yeah,
onboarding experience is, I have personal experience. That is where I put a lot of people on. Like, recruiters are doing their job, sources are they're doing their job. If onboarding team does not do a good job by welcoming, then we are losing it. So
yeah,
I think the organizations, I mean, this is from, everybody who comes into the picture say this, organizations should spend good amount of budget on training their HR teams, putting people in right places.
makes sense, makes sense. Yeah, I think the same point as the interviewing side of things, right? Not
Exactly.
everybody can be welcoming to a
Mm.
candidate, so you need to train those people to actually do those activities, right?
And more than that, Raj, always, when you identify your key strengths, right, of an individual,
Hmm.
play on that key strength. Don't force somebody to do something they don't like it. Like today, I might be very good in, say, in my conversations. Put me in
Hmm.
something that excites other people also, so that they can
Right,
connect with me from their soul, and then they know that I can do this job. Instead of like
right.
forcing them to do something they don't enjoy doing it.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very good advice for people who are in that role of assigning these sort of
Mm,
activities effectively, right?
mm.
Sounds good. I think, Swapna, we are almost about time. How was your experience, your closing remarks?
Good, extremely good. I think, good opportunity to talk about remote. I think lately I've not seen people talking about it. I hope I did also add some value to this particular topic. And thank you very much,
Definitely.
Raj, for hosting us. I mean, hosting me personally on this session.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, Swapna, for sharing your insights, and would love to get some feedback from the audience as well. Right? Thank a lot, Swapna.
Thank you.